Ollie here, and this is my review of Revenge of the Cybermen, the fifth and final story of the 12th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor. Revenge of the Cybermen is the 79th story overall, it's 4 parts long, and it's written by Jerry Davis in his final contribution to classic Who. So, a bit of a change of scenery from, I'm actually doing this review from the kitchen slash sitting room in my uni house because the lighting in my room is a bit crap, so I thought let me just come here for a bit and do some reviews. So the plot of Revenge of the Cybermen is as follows. The Doctor and his companions are lost in time, expected to be reunited with the TARDIS following a secret mission for the Time Lords. They instead find themselves on a plague-stricken space station orbiting the remnants of Voga, planet of gold. The Doctor, Sarah and Harry have stumbled into the last battle of an ancient conflict between humankind and one of its terrifying foes, the Cybermen. Revenge of the Cybermen, and to be honest, it's a story I never really liked, and it's a shame because it could have been better. I think maybe it's because it comes after like such an iconic story like Genesis of the Daleks, and then you have a story like Revenge of the Cybermen. It's a bit jarring to say the least. The production was actually decent. The Nervous Beacon set from the Ark in Space was reused, but it was actually explained that this story actually takes place at least 1,000 years before the Ark in Space. And so it actually makes sense. I actually like the Voga sets. They looked very golden and majestic and looked really impressive as well. And I think some of the outer cave scenes were actually filmed on the location. I think a lot of things went wrong during production because I think a crew member's wife accidentally cursed the set, but I think she found something and then she accidentally put a curse on like the entire set. I think one of the crew saw like a ghost from an Irish diver that died a few years before the making of the story, and Elizabeth Sladen almost drowned because I think the speedboat she was on malfunctioned, and I think one of the crew members had to rescue her or something like that. And I think other things went wrong as well, so I think it is a bit of a creepy situation that the creepy circumstances that went behind the making of this story. The scripts were okay, and not the best, but it was still decent. The decent dialogue and all that. The direction by Michael E. Bryant was okay, but not the best. I did like the music for this story. I made the story somewhat tolerable than it actually was. The plot was actually good, but the execution was a letdown, to be honest. As the title suggests, the Cybermen are back, and we haven't seen the Cybermen since season 6, since the invasion from the Charlton era, and the Cybermen were let down as well. I get to why I think why the Cybermen weren't done any justice in this story later on. But I think there were some plot conveniences that were a bit annoying and a bit nonsensical to say the least, such as the episode 1 cliffhanger when Sarah got bitten by a Cyberman and then she contracted that space virus or whatever, and then the Doctor concluded that by a trip from the transmat. Sorry, a trip with the transmat would pretty much cure Sarah Jane, and she actually does get cured. And so I think it was just done to get people to come back to watch the following week, but yeah. The pacing was actually decent around the middle, but most of the story was boresome and around episode parts 1 and 2, and I felt as if nothing really happened. And the Cybermen don't actually get to do a whole lot until when they show up at the end of part 2, and then part 3, I think that's when they start doing the dirty work, to say the least. Not that many memorable moments, except for the Doctor yelling, "Harry Sullivan is an imbecile!" Sorry, my voice. When he tried to remove the bomb that the Cybermen had attached to the Doctor and some of the other crew members of the Beacon. So yeah, that was a memorable moment from this story, and yeah, not really a whole entirely memorable story other than that moment from the Doctor. So yeah, acting was a highlight for me in the story, and I felt the acting pretty much saved Revenge of the Cybermen from being a complete flat-out disaster. Tom Baker was great as always, and I really like how he settled into the role of the Doctor, and I love how confident he is, and especially going into the stories, especially from Robot to here to this story. I think he's definitely gained some confidence, and you can pretty much tell he's going to be a great Doctor, and it definitely showed in the season 12 stories. My favorite moment from from Tom Baker is probably, as I mentioned before, the Harry Sullivan is an imbecile scene. My other favorite scene was when he was pretty much taunting the Cybermen in part 3, saying, "You're just a pathetic bunch of tin soldiers, you can't really do much," and stuff like that. Elizabeth Staten was pretty good as well. Sarah Jane actually gets to do some heavy lifting on her own, and I actually liked how she was able to get back to the beacon by on her own accord to try and warn the Doctor about the Vogan's rocket in part 3, but I didn't really like how she's pretty much spent the remainder of part 3 just hiding from the Cybermen. She was just pretty much, when like every time we went to the beacon around the last few minutes, she was just backed up against the wall trying to hide from the Cybermen. That was just a bit meh. Ian Martin was good as well, but Harry he did a lot, but not as a lot as Sarah did. But I think other than being a contributing factor to the part 3 cliffhanger, which of course led to the Harry Sullivan is an imbecile scene, and obviously that cliffhanger entailed like Harry accidentally causing a rock fall which killed I think one of the other main villains of the story, and then he was trying to get to the Doctor, and I think he finds the Doctor and tries to remove the bomb that was attached to him, but obviously Harry doesn't know that, so that's what it actually leads him up to. Cast, not as many, but they were okay, and we had Stevenson. He was the head officer of the Nova Beacon crew, and one of the survivors of the space plague that pretty much killed everyone on the space station. He was an okay character. I liked him and actually recognized the actor because his actor Ronald Lee Hunt was in The Seeds of Death, which is actually my favorite classic Who story of all time. We had Lester. He was a member of the Nova Beacon crew. I liked his character. He sacrificed himself to allow the Doctor and Harry to escape to see Tyrone, one of the head Vogans, by... He pretty much had to deactivate the bomb that the Cybermen had attached to him to pretty much destroy the Cybermen and eventually himself. We had Warner. He was a communications expert, and then I think he was one of the last victims that died from the space plague. We had Tyrone. He was one of the leaders of the Vogans, and he didn't like how Vorus, another main Vogan, was misusing his power. And later, he allowed the Doctor 15 minutes to save Sarah Jane from the Cybermen from the Nova Beacon. But I think Vorus was unhappy about this because he really wanted the rocket to be launched. He was a good character, and he is played by Kevin Stoney, who previously played Maverick Chen in the first Doctor story, The Daleks' Master Plan, and in the second Doctor story, The Invasion, which was another Cyberman story. And it's kind of weird how Kevin Stoney isn't actually playing the villain this time. And lastly, we had Magrek. He was the Vogan Guardian that worked with Vorus, and he didn't trust Kelman at all. No, yeah, he was actually a double agent for Vorus and the other Cybermen. He was an okay character, to say the least. I can't really remember what happened to his character towards the end, but I don't know if he died or whatever. So on to the villains. We had the Cybermen returning from a 7-year absence. I believe that this is the weakest the Cybermen has been in the classic series, in terms of writing, anyways. Because the Cybermen, I felt they weren't as menacing as they were in like other Cybermen stories, like Tomb of the Cybermen or The Invasion or whatever. And I didn't really like how their robotic voices were removed, and they spoke as if they had helmets on. And they're just that whole electrical voice thing. There wasn't just really there. It was just a bunch of posh actors just talking normally. And obviously, I felt Christopher Robbie, who played the cyber leader, was a bit too posh for a Cyberman, to say the least. And he wasn't as memorable as the 80s Cyberman. I think he was played by the 80s cyber leader, who was played by David Banks, who's pretty much my favorite Cyberman actor ever. And pretty much the same fault with the whole robotic voices are pretty much still there for the 80s, but they actually made it. I think David Banks actually makes his Cyberman stories memorable because he just is the way he talks. But obviously, I'll get more into that when I get to Earthshock, whenever that will be. And obviously, the Cybermen in this story looked what's the terminology here? They looked utterly ridiculous. And especially the scene in part 4 when the Doctor and Sarah were pretty much captured by the Cybermen, and then the Cybermen were pretty much trying to like use their strength to like weaken the Doctor and Sarah, and obviously with the Cybermen had pretty much weakened Sarah to the point where she was on the ground, and then I think the Cyber leader was pretty much grabbed the Doctor by his shoulders and was just shaking him. They were just like, what? Sorry, it's a funny scene, but the Cyber leader was just pretty much just shaking the Doctor into the ground. It looked ridiculous, man. Stupid, but it looked awfully ridiculous. And obviously, we had Kelman. He was an ex-photographer that was sent to the Beacon, who ended up working for the Cybermen, but he was later revealed that he was paid by Vorus to to actually work with the Cybermen to try and like lure them into Vogue or lure them to the space beacon so they can fire the rocket to destroy the Cybermen. He was an okay side villain, slightly more interesting than the Cybermen, but he was accidentally killed by Harry when he caused the rockfall, which also injured the Doctor. And finally, we had Vorus. He was the leader of the Guardians of Vogon. He wanted to defeat the Cybermen by any means necessary. He was also responsible for the Vogon Civil War that was going on, and the rocket that was supposed to hit the beacon. He was later shot dead by Tyrant. I think between the Cybermen and Killman, I think he was very interesting between the two, and I actually think it was clever how he was pretty much working for the Cybermen but betraying them at the same time. And that was pretty cool. So on to the faults I have with the story. I think it felt a lot boring. The Cybermen were written really poorly, and another fault I had was with the Cybermen. They weren't utilized properly compared to as they were even in the Tomb of the Cybermen or even the Wheel in Space. It was just there for like the space plague storyline, and when that was pretty much resolved, they didn't really appear anymore, and that was a bit annoying. Oh, granted, they couldn't really have done anything else, but it was still at the same time they could have actually used the Cybermen to at least attack the Doctor and Sarah, to say the least. And plus, they looked really big for some odd reason. I really don't know why. Compared to their mouse-like size in the previous stories they appeared in, but I think the Cybermen looked way too big, and I didn't really like that at all. And I think it would make the story a little bit better if they were like smaller. And obviously, another thought I have is this story pretty much stands out like a sore thumb in comparison to other stories in Hinchcliffe era, because it pretty much lacked the space sci-fi gothic horror stuff like elements, and I think it would have been a better fit if it was in the John Pertwee era, because it was just a very odd fit, because you have a story like Genesis of the Daleks, which does have some gothic horror elements with like war and like, well, not necessarily the gothic, but it's just how like the Hinchcliffe storytelling, how dark it was, and then you have a story like Revenge of the Cybermen, which is just ish. So to conclude, The Revenge of the Cybermen is a story that could have had a lot of potential, but a lot of disappointing factors really let it down, and it's a very disappointing end to the 12th season, and I gave Revenge of the Cybermen a 4.5 out of 10, which is now a bad egg. So that wraps up my reviews for season 12 after being loaded with coursework and other stuff. Join me next time as I rank all 5 stories in the 12th season. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And please join my Discord server if you want to. So until then, see you later.